What happened to men pursuing girls? When was the pivotal moment that a man chose to not go after a girl anymore or put in any effort? It seems like guys can just put the bare minimum and not even really put in effort anymore. They don't really care to. Or they're like, why don't girls just go and make the first move and make the effort? When did it become a thing? Now it's like role reversal where they expect girls to be making the first moves, yearning for a guy and chasing him.
What if everything you've been told about relationships for the last 50 years was a lie? What if the people who spent decades screaming that men were the problem, that masculinity itself was toxic, that you didn't need a man to be complete, are now waking up in cold sweat, realizing the exact opposite is true? And what if the quiet exodus you're seeing right now, millions of men simply walking away, building their own lives, locking the door behind them and never looking back, is not the beginning of the story, but the final chapter of the decades long con? Stay with me until the very end, because by the time this video is over, you're either going to be cheering or you're going to be furious, but you will not be unmoved, and you'll finally understand why all roads now lead to one destination: men walking away. If you want a more raw, unfiltered, angry guy content, drop the second it goes live, smash that like button right now, share this video with every man you know who needs to hear it, hit subscribe, and most importantly, click the notification bell and select all so you never miss a single upload. And while you're down there in the description, go check out Angry's Crypto Academy. That's where I teach you step by step how to actually protect your assets, how to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency the right way, and how to build real wealth in a world that's trying to take everything from you. The Academy link is right below this video. Click it, sign up, and start safeguarding your future today. And if you're enjoying these videos and you want to keep me caffeinated and firing on all cylinders, there's a link where you can buy me a Red Bull. It's greatly appreciated and it keeps the content coming. Like, let's get into it. Women are terrified right now. And for the first time in a long time, it's starting to show in public. You can scroll through social media and see it bubbling up, little cracks in the armor. Some women are starting to admit, quietly at first and louder, that the possibility haunting them isn't that men are the problem. The possibility that keeps them up at night is that they themselves have been the problem all along. Decades of being told they were flawless, decades of being fed the fantasy that every woman is automatically a 10 out of 10, no matter what she brings to the table, decades of being encouraged to see men as disposable utilities, and now the mirror is being held up whether they like it or not. Men are withdrawing from dating. Men are filing for divorce in record numbers. Men are walking away from society itself. And for the first time, women are being forced to confront or got the very uncomfortable truth. When the chaos leaves with the man, the chaos was never the man to begin with. Look at what's actually happening on the ground. Men are not raging. They're not screaming in the streets. They're not starting movements with catchy hashtags. They're simply leaving quietly, calmly, and permanently. They're going home, they're going to the woods, they're going to private invite only gatherings where no cameras are allowed and no women are invited. They're building small gyms in their garages, they're learning trades, they're stacking cryptocurrency, they're mastering day trading, they're prepping, they're creating parallel economies based on barter and skills, and they're doing it all without announcing it on TikTok. And the most terrifying part for a lot of women watching this unfold is that men look happier than they've ever been. There's no anger in their eyes anymore. There's peace. And peace is the one thing a certain type of person cannot stand to see in someone they've spent years trying to control. Let me paint the picture clearly because I want you to feel how stark this contrast really is. For 50 years, women were sold a very specific story. You are perfect exactly the way you are. You don't need to improve anything. You don't need a man. In fact, men are holding you back. Your value is inherent and infinite simply because you exist. You are the table. He should be happy to just sit at it. You can have the high-powered career, the endless girls' trips, the casual hookups with the top 10% of men whenever you feel like it. And then, When you're ready, somewhere around 38 or 40, you can flip a switch and a high value man who has been patiently waiting on standby will appear, ready to wife you up and finance the life you deserve. That was the marketing pitch. That was the dream sold on every television show, every women's magazine, every empowerment seminar, every viral soundbite on Instagram. And millions of women bought it completely. Now, fast forward to today, and reality is collecting the bill with interest. Inflation is crushing everyone. Rent is through the roof. Groceries feel like a luxury purchase. And suddenly, being a boss babe who grinds at a corporate job that would replace her before her obituary hits the paper doesn't feel so empowering anymore. Suddenly realizing that the same company gave you a cupcake on your 35th birthday and then laid you off 6 months later stings a little different. Suddenly waking up at 39 or 42 and realizing your fertility window has slammed shut and the men who you thought would always be waiting are nowhere to be found hits very differently. And the worst part, the part that keeps some women staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., is the growing realization that there is no one else to blame. The friends who said, "You go, girl," while you were running through your prime years are the same friends who won't pick up the phone when you need help moving, won't spot you $50 until payday, won't even give you a ride to a doctor's appointment. The harsh truth is starting to settle in. You were sold a fantasy. You lived the fantasy, and now the fantasy is over and the men are gone. And let's be crystal clear about something. Men didn't leave because they lost some argument. Men left because they finally won the only argument that ever mattered, the argument with themselves about whether peace was possible. For decades, men were told their natural instincts were wrong, that their desire for respect was toxic, that their need for loyalty was controlling, that their expectation of reciprocity was entitlement. Every time a man stood up and said, "This doesn't feel fair," he was labeled fragile, insecure, or dangerous. So men did what men have always done when faced with an unwinnable battle. They stopped fighting it entirely. They didn't declare war, they declared independence. And the moment a lot of women are discovering is that independence looks really good on men. You see it in the savings rates. Single men are saving more money than at any point in modern history, despite a brutal economy. You see it in the mental health statistics. Single men are reporting higher levels of life satisfaction than married men for the first time ever. You see it in the explosion of home gyms, the rise of crypto communities that are 95% male, the private men's groups popping up in every city where the first rule is what happens here stays here, and no recording devices allowed. Men are not lonely in the way people think. Being alone is not the same as feeling alone. And once a man makes peace with himself, once he removes the chaos, the drama, the constant criticism, the walking on eggshells, he discovers something shocking. Life is actually really good when you're not being punished for existing. Women spent years pushing men away, and now they're confused about where all the men went. They told men not to approach them in the gym, so men stopped going to corporate gyms and built their own. They told men their presence wasn't wanted in bars and clubs unless they were buying rounds of drinks, so men stopped showing up, and the clubs are now have rows of empty stools and women sitting in circles staring at their phones, wondering why nobody's buying them drinks anymore. They told men that paying for dates was patriarchal, so men stopped asking women on dates altogether and started taking themselves on the vacations they used to pay for 2 plane tickets to enjoy. Every time women moved the goalposts, men didn't argue about where the new goalpost should be. They just picked up the ball and went home. And home has never looked better. This is not happening in one country. This is global. In the United States, by 2030, 45% of women aged 25 to 44 are projected to be single and childless. When you add single mothers into that equation, the number jumps to 60 or 70% of women who will not have a stable male partner. In South Korea, the birth rate collapse isn't because of some women's 4B movement refusing to date or marry. It's because men built systems to protect themselves and then walked away so completely that the entire society is now in demographic freefall. Japanese men have been doing this for 20 years and calling it herbivore mode. Chinese men are opting out in record numbers. This isn't a trend. This is a tidal wave. And here's where it gets really starts to sting for a lot of women watching from the sidelines. Men aren't angry anymore. That's the scariest part. Angry men can be negotiated with. Angry men can be shamed. Angry men will at least engage. But men who have found peace? Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Men who wake up in the morning, hit the home gym, make a protein shake, check their crypto portfolio, hang out with other peaceful men, and go to bed without a single dramatic text message blowing up their phone? Those men are untouchable. You can't shame a man who doesn't need your validation. You can't control a man who doesn't want anything from you. You can't guilt a man who has already accepted that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes him feel alone while sharing the same bed. Women are starting to post videos, some of them tearful, some of them defiant, begging men to come back. Where have all the good men gone? They ask, as if the good men vanished into thin air one day. But those men didn't vanish. They just stopped playing a game that was designed to make them lose every single time. They stopped showing up to a casino where the house always wins and built their own table instead. And now that the casino is empty, now that the restaurants have no couples on Friday nights, now that the jewelry stores are doing 50% less business, now that the divorce lawyers are seeing fewer male clients willing to sign their lives away, the reality is setting in. Men were never the problem. The problem was expecting men to keep showing up after being told for decades that showing up made them the problem. Let me tell you a story that almost nobody is talking about yet, but in 5 years, every single person watching this will remember exactly where they were when they first heard it. There's a quiet revolution happening in plain sight, and it's not being led by politicians. It's not being led by celebrities, and it certainly isn't being led by the women who spent the last half century telling men how unnecessary they were. This revolution is being led by regular guys, the mechanic who used to fix his girlfriend's car for free, the software engineer who used to pay for every vacation, the construction worker who used to come home exhausted but still take out the trash and listen to a 20-minute monologue about someone else's drama at work. These men who woke up one day, looked around, and realized they were pouring their entire lives into a black hole that not only didn't appreciate it, but actively punished them for it. And instead of complaining, instead of begging, instead of trying to negotiate better terms, they simply stopped pouring. They capped the well, locked the gate, and walked away. And the silence that followed is deafening. You want to know how complete this walkaway has become? Look at the restaurant industry right now. High-end steakhouses that used to be packed on Friday and Saturday nights with couples are running at 30 to 40% capacity. Why? Because the men who used to drop $300 on dinner and a bottle of wine so they could sit across from someone who spent the entire evening on her phone aren't doing it anymore. They're grilling that same steak at home, pouring the same wine into the same glasses, and enjoying it in peace while watching whatever they want on a 200-inch projector screen they bought with the money they used to spend, trying to impress someone who was never going to be impressed. The manager of a very famous rooftop lounge in Miami told me personally last month that Thursday through Sunday used to be wall to wall people, and now on most weekends they have more empty tables than occupied ones. When he asked his female customers why their usual groups weren't coming, the answer was almost always the same. The guys stopped asking us out. Not we stopped going out. The guys stopped asking. That is a seismic shift happening in real time. The same thing is happening with jewelry stores. Engagement ring sales have been dropping for 6 straight years, and the drop has accelerated since 2022. The big chains are quietly closing locations left and right. Why? Because men looked at the price of a lab grown 2 carat diamond, looked at the divorce statistics, looked at the family court horror stories, looked at the woman they were thinking about proposing to who still had situationships in her phone from last summer. And they said to themselves, yeah, I'll keep the 100 grand and buy a duplex instead. And they're doing exactly that. Young men in their 20s and 30s are becoming first time real estate investors at a rate we have never seen before. And the common denominator in almost every story is I was going to buy her a ring, but then I woke up. That is not an exaggeration. That is the new normal. Now, let's talk about the gym industry because this one of the biggest lies ever sold was that women go to the gym to work out. Women go to the gym to be seen working out. Men go to the gym to actually work out. When corporate gyms started allowing women to film every man who dared breathe in their direction when signs started going up saying no judgment zone, but somehow only men were being judged when false accusations started costing men their memberships and their reputations. Men did what men always do. They adapted. They canceled their Planet Fitness memberships. They sold the extra plates they didn't need. They turned the second bedroom or the garage into a private gym, and they never looked back. The result? Planet Fitness stock has been flat or declining for years, while companies that sell squat racks, barbells, and rubber flooring for home gyms are absolutely printing money. The corporate gyms are now filled with women walking on treadmills at 2.8 miles an hour while taking selfies, wondering why the gym culture feels so dead. It feels dead because the lifeblood walked out the door and built something better at home. And while all of this is happening, something even more fascinating is emerging. Men are rebuilding brotherhood in a way that hasn't existed in the West for decades. Private men's clubs are popping up in every major city, not the old cigar and brandy country club kind. These are warehouses, lofts, barns, converted industrial spaces where the only requirement for entry is that you're a man and you're invited by another member. No phones allowed at most of them. No recording devices, no social media drama, just men lifting, training jujitsu, smoking meat, debating ideas, playing poker, and talking openly about everything they were never allowed to say in mixed company. I've been to several of these spaces in different states, and the energy is the same everywhere. Pure peace mixed with pure power. You walk in carrying the weight of the world, and you walk out feeling like you could carry the world if you wanted to. Women hear about these places and immediately start clutching pearls about exclusion. But the men inside aren't excluding women because they hate women. They're excluding drama, accusation, performance, and chaos. And the four things that follow modern Western women into every space they enter. You see the same pattern online. The entire manosphere didn't explode because men suddenly became angry. It exploded because men finally felt safe to speak. Channels that used to talk only about finance or fitness or gaming quietly started adding segments about gender dynamics, and the audience numbers went through the roof. Graham Stefan, a guy who built his entire brand on real estate and index funds, now regularly drops 2-hour podcasts about why men are opting out. And the comment sections are filled with thousands of men saying, this is the first time anyone has said out loud what I've been thinking for years. Ho_math went from a tiny channel drawing diagrams about dating to hundreds of thousands of subscribers because he applied cold, hard logic to female behavior in a way that made men feel sane again. Even gaming channels that used to be about speedrunning Mario now spend half their videos talking about how Sweet Baby Inc. and other consulting firms are destroying male escapism, and the view counts on those videos dwarf the actual gameplay content. Men are starving for spaces where they are allowed to be men without apology. And every time one of those spaces appears, it fills up instantly. Meanwhile, Women are discovering something they were never prepared for: true isolation. They spent years cultivating large followings on social media, hundreds of friends they met on girls' trips, group chats that never stop buzzing. And yet, when the electricity goes out, when the car won't start, when they need someone to help move a couch or spot them $200 until Friday, the phones go silent. There's a reason you're starting to see TikToks with millions of views where women in their late 30s and early 40s are crying on camera saying, I have no one. They really don't. They spent their 20s and early 30s surrounding themselves with people who were fun at brunch but useless in a crisis. And now the bill is due. The men who would have dropped everything to help them are no longer in their contacts. The female friends who swore sisters before misters won't even answer a text when it's not about gossip or a night out. And the state that promised to replace men with welfare programs and affirmative action is completely broke because the men who pay 80% of the taxes are working 30 hours a week, living minimally, and letting the government figure out how to make the math work without them. Let's talk about that tax thing for a minute because it's one of the biggest unspoken advantages men have right now. Men generate the overwhelming majority of income tax revenue in every Western country. When men decide to work less, earn less, consume less, and structure their lives around minimalism and self reliance, governments lose their primary cash cow. Women, on average, are net consumers of tax revenue. They take out more in services than they put in through taxes. That system only works when men are grinding 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on for everyone. But when men look at the deal and say, wait a minute, I'm killing myself so that someone who hates me can buy Starbucks and post about how all men are trash, and then quietly downshift to part time remote work, crypto gains that are taxed at a lower rate, or cash based side hustles the government can't track, the entire house of cards starts to wobble. And it is wobbling right now. Cities are raising property taxes, sales taxes, and every other tax they can think of because the high earning men who used to subsidize everything are no longer participating at the same level. The programs that were supposed to replace husbands are running out of money, and the men who could refill the tank are saying no thanks. This is why you're starting to see desperate attempts to lure men back into the plantation. Articles with headlines like The Dangerous Rise of Men Who Won't Date American Women. Podcasts where women spend 3 hours trying to figure out where all the good men went. Politicians suddenly talking about falling birth rates as a national emergency after spending years celebrating child free life. Even some influencers who built their entire brand on I don't need no man are now posting videos with titles like Maybe We Went Too Far. But here's the part they still don't understand: men aren't hiding, men aren't lost, men aren't broken. Men are exactly where they want to be, doing exactly what they want to do. And the price of admission to that life is now permanently set at leave me alone. And women are discovering that they don't have the currency to pay that price because peace is not negotiable. Once a man tastes genuine peace, waking up without dread, spending his money on things that improve his life, surrounding himself with brothers who have his back, building his body and his bank account without someone constantly moving the goalposts, there is no offer on earth that can pull him back into the chaos. Not tears, not promises, not even the promise of children. Because most men have done the math and realized that the current family court system makes children a liability, not an asset for fathers. The juice is no longer worth the squeeze, and men are perfectly content sipping their own juice in their own garden they built themselves. And while Western women are standing in the ashes, wondering how it all fell apart, men are quietly building the next chapter. Crypto communities that are 98% male, private land funds where groups of men pool money to buy acreage in the mountains or the desert and create self sufficient compounds, barter networks where a plumber fixes a mechanic's truck and the mechanic tunes up an electrician's generator and nobody reports twas a dime to the tax man. Overseas communities in places like Thailand, the Philippines, Colombia, and Georgia, where a Western income goes 5 to 10 times further, and the women still value masculinity instead of treating it like a disease. These ecosystems are growing every single day, and the one thing they all have in common is a very clear boundary. Western entitlement is not welcome here. You want to know how serious this has become? There are now electricians, plumbers, and contractors who openly charge women double, sometimes triple, what they charge men. And they're booked solid anyway because the men who used to do those jobs for free or at cost for girlfriends, wives, and female friends no longer exist in those women's lives. A woman in California posted a viral TikTok crying because every licensed electrician she called quoted her $4,000 to change a breaker panel. And when she finally found a guy who would do it for $2,000, he told her straight up, "I charge women more because 9 times out of 10, they're the ones who got the house in the divorce, and I'm not subsidizing that." She was furious. The comment section cheered. That is the new reality. Men are not punishing women. Men are simply done rewarding bad behavior. There's a difference. Punishment requires engagement. Reward withdrawal requires nothing more than walking away. And walking away is exactly what millions of men have done. And the more women scream about how unfair it is, the more men realize they made the right decision. Because the loudest voices complaining is coming from the same crowd that spent years saying, "We don't need men." Well, congratulations. You were right. You don't need men, and men finally believe you. Let me take you 10 years into the future for a second, because what's happening right now is only the opening act. Imagine it's 2035. The headlines are screaming about a permanent demographic winter that no government stimulus can fix. Entire school districts in the Midwest have closed because there aren't enough children to fill the classrooms. Nursing homes are overflowing while maternity wards sit half empty. With the social security systems in America and Europe have officially defaulted on their promises because the worker to retiree ratio collapsed faster than anyone modeled. Luxury apartment buildings in Manhattan, Miami, and Los Angeles that were built for single professional women in their 30s and 40s are being converted into co living spaces or short term rentals because the residents can't afford the rent anymore without a second income. And in the middle of all this, there are sprawling private compounds in Idaho, Montana, Texas, and Tennessee, where groups of men in their 30s and 40s live on 100-acre plots with solar arrays, wells, greenhouses, gun ranges, and high speed Starlink, paying almost no taxes, completely off grid, and happier than any generation of men in recorded history. The women who spent the 2010s and early 2020s calling these men losers, incels, and basement dwellers are now in their late 40s and early 50s, still posting throwback photos from Mykonos 2017 with captions about living my best life, while quietly applying for Section 8 housing and wondering why none of their old orbiters will return their messages. That future is not science fiction. That future is already under construction, and the foundation was poured the day the first million men decided peace out and never came back. But let's come back to right now because the collapse is already visible if you know where to look. Look at the dating app data that the companies tried to keep quiet. Hinge, Bumble, and Tinder have all admitted in internal memos that have leaked over the last 18 months that the gender imbalance has become mathematically unsustainable. In most major cities, the ratio is now between 7 and 12 women for every one man who is actually active on the app and responding to messages. The men who are still there are the top 5%, the guys with the six-figure salaries, six-pack abs, and 6-foot height. And even those guys are starting to delete the apps because the entitlement has become unbearable. One venture capitalist in San Francisco told me he closed his Raya account after receiving a first message that read, "I don't usually date guys under 6'1", but your boat is cute, so I'll make an exception. Pick me up at 8 and don't be late." He laughed, screenshot it, sent it to his group chat with the caption, "This is why we're done," and hasn't opened a dating app since. Multiply that one story by 10 million, and you start to understand why the apps are quietly laying off staff and pivoting to friendship features nobody asked for. The passport bro phenomenon everyone used to mock is now a full blown industry. There are agencies in Medellin, Manila, Bangkok, and Belize that do nothing but arrange extended stays for Western men who want to spend 3 to 12 months living like kings on $2,500 a month while dating women who still believe femininity is a virtue instead of a crime. These agencies are booking solid 18 months in advance. The men who go aren't the stereotypical retired boomers everyone imagines. The average client now is 32 years old, makes 80 grand a year, remote tech or trading job, and realized he can live better in Southeast Asia or Latin America than he ever could in a 400 square foot studio in Austin or Denver while paying alimony to a woman who hates him. And the craziest part, these guys aren't even angry anymore. They send pictures back to their buddies in the States, standing on beaches with beautiful, sweet, happy women who cook dinner and smile when they come home. And the caption is never, "Look how I showed them." The caption is always some version of, "I should have done this 10 years ago." Meanwhile, back in the West, the loneliness epidemic among women aged 25 to 40 is now officially worse than the loneliness epidemic among elderly men that everyone was panicking about 5 years ago. The studies are coming out monthly now. One from Harvard in 2024 showed that women in that age bracket report the highest rates of clinical depression and anxiety ever recorded for any demographic in American history. The researchers were stunned. They expected men to be the lonely ones after all the men are falling behind articles. Instead, they found the exact opposite. Single men under 40 are reporting the highest life satisfaction scores since polling began, while single women in the same age group are in full blown crisis mode. And when the researchers asked women what support systems they had, the most common answer was, "My therapist and my TikTok community." Let that sink in. The generation that bragged about having thousands of friends and followers now lists an overworked therapist they see once every 2 weeks and a comment section full of strangers as their primary support network. And people wonder why the SSRIs aren't working anymore. The entertainment industry is collapsing in slow motion for the exact same reason. Hollywood keeps greenlighting movie after movie with the same strong female lead who don't need no man template, and every single one of them bombs harder than the last. Disney lost almost $1 billion on Marvel and Star Wars projects in 2023 and 2024 alone because men stopped showing up. The video game industry is in free fall because every AAA title now ships with lectures baked into the script, and men simply refuse to pre order anymore. The people in charge keep scratching their heads and blaming toxic fans, but the truth is much simpler. Men vote with their wallets, and right now their wallets are closed for business when it comes to anything that disrespects them. The indie scene, almost entirely male created and male consumed, is exploding. Small studios making games with no politics, no lectures, and actually fun gameplay are pulling in more money per employee than the giant publishers spending $300 million to make propaganda nobody wants to play. Even the wedding industry, the multi-billion-dollar machine that convinced generations of women that one magical day was the pinnacle of existence, is starting to crack. Bridal boutiques are closing left and right. The average wedding cost hit $75,000 at the peak in 2022. And now couples, or rather women, because they're still the ones planning everything, are being forced to scale back to backyard ceremonies because the men who would have happily paid for the fairy tale 5 years ago simply aren't proposing anymore. I talked to a wedding planner in Chicago who said her bookings for 2025 are down 60% from 2019. And every cancellation email she gets from the groom contains some version of the same sentence. We decided to buy a house instead. That is not a small thing. That is men choosing assets over pageantry, equity over Instagram likes, and future security over a party that ends at midnight. And while all these industries are imploding, men are quietly building the most robust parallel economy the world has ever seen. Crypto is the obvious one, but it's only the beginning. There are now private medical networks where doctors who got tired of dealing with entitled patients only see male clients and charge cash prices that are half of what insurance companies pay. There are food co ops where men who own small farms trade directly with men who are chefs or butchers, and nobody touches the corporate supply chain. There are land funds where 20 guys put in 50 grand each, buy 500 acres in the mountains, put it in an LLC, and every member gets lifetime access to hunting, fishing, shooting, and camping whenever they want. There are coding boot camps that only accept men and guarantee remote jobs paying six figures within 12 months. These ecosystems are growing so fast that nobody can track them all. And the one thing they all have in common is the same quiet rule: no drama, no victims, no entitlement, no access for people who think the world owes them something. You earn your way in or you stay outside. And millions of men are choosing to stay outside the old system forever. The birth rate collapse is the final nail, and it's being driven almost entirely by men refusing to participate. People keep blaming women for not wanting kids, but the data tells a different story. In every country where detailed surveys have been done, South Korea, Japan, Italy, Spain, the United States, the number one reason men give for not wanting children is: I do not trust the legal system to protect me as a father. The number two reason is: I do not want to bring children into a society that hates boys. Women still say they want children at roughly the same rates they always have, but the men who would have to sign up for 18 years of financial liability and potential emotional devastation are saying no in overwhelming numbers. And no amount of government baby bonuses, no amount of man up shaming, no amount of tearful TikToks changes the math. When the penalty for failure is losing half your wealth, access to your children, and your reputation over a single accusation, rational men opt out. And rational men are opting out by the millions. So, where does this leave women in the West? It leaves them exactly where their choices led them, competing for an ever shrinking pool of men who are willing to play the old game, discovering that the state cannot and will not replace a husband, realizing that their female friends are competitors, not allies, when push comes to shove, and watching from the sidelines as men build lives of peace, purpose, and brotherhood that they are no longer invited to join. Some women are adapting. A small but growing number are deleting the dating apps, hitting the gym for real, learning to cook, dressing femininely again, and approaching men with respect and reciprocity. Those women are finding partners faster than they can believe, because the men who are still open to relationships can spot the difference between sincerity and performance from a mile away. But the majority are doubling down, tripling down, writing think pieces about how men need to be forced back into society for the greater good, demanding that governments tax single men extra, begging tech companies to ban manosphere content, and discovering that none of it works. You cannot negotiate with men who want nothing from you. You cannot shame men who are already at peace. You cannot tax men who have structured their lives to need almost nothing from the system. And that is the part that keeps women up at night more than anything else. Men are not coming back, not in the numbers required to keep the old machine running, not at the level of effort and sacrifice that was once taken for granted. The men who walked away are building something new, something better, something that does not require your permission, your approval, or your presence. And every day, more men join them. The tide is not turning. The tide has already gone out and it took the sandcastle with it. So here we are. The experiment has been run. 50 years of telling men they were unnecessary, defective, toxic, disposable. 50 years of restructuring laws, culture, and economies around the idea that men could thrive without them. 50 years of celebrating every time a man was punished for simply being male. The results are in, the data is undeniable, and the conclusion is brutal in its simplicity. Society does not work without masculine energy willingly invested in it. And masculine energy is no longer willing. Let's go deeper, because most people still think this is just about dating drama or some temporary tantrum that will blow over when the economy gets better or when men get bored of playing Call of Duty in their basements. That's what the coping articles keep saying. Just wait until these guys hit 40 and the biological clock panic sets in. Brother, I've got news for you. The guys who walked away aren't the ones with a ticking clock anymore. They solved that problem the day they decided peace was non-negotiable. The panic you're seeing on certain timelines right now isn't male regret. It's the sound of millions of alarm clocks going off in apartments and houses across the West. And the women hitting snooze keep discovering the button doesn't work anymore. Let me paint you another picture that almost nobody is connecting the dots on yet. Go look at the explosion of micro gyms and garage gym equipment companies over the last 36 months. Companies like Rogue Fitness, Rep Fitness, Titan, all of them are posting record revenue year after year, while 24-hour fitness and LA Fitness are closing locations faster than they can send out the press releases. The dirty little secret the corporate chains don't want you to know is that the average lifetime value of a male member is 4 to 5 times higher than a female member. Men buy the memberships, men buy the personal training packages, men buy the overpriced protein smoothies, men show up at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m., no matter what. When men leave, the entire business model collapses, and they have left in droves. The parking lots that used to be packed with pickup trucks at 6 a.m. are now half empty, and the remaining members are mostly women filming 30-second dance routines for Instagram reels between sets of cable kickbacks. The managers are quietly panicking because they know the math doesn't work when the only people paying $49 a month are the ones who show up twice a week to walk on a treadmill while scrolling TikTok. But the men didn't disappear. They just moved the iron into their garages, basements, spare bedrooms, and backyard sheds. Walk through any middle-class neighborhood on a Saturday morning now and count how many garage doors are open with the sound of plates clanging and Metallica blasting. I did that experiment in a random suburb outside Dallas last month. 47 garage doors open, 44 of them had squat racks. Only 3 had kids' toys scattered around. That is a cultural earthquake happening one squat at a time. These guys aren't posting their workouts for likes. They aren't filming day in the life vlogs. They're throwing on a 10-year-old pair of Ray-Bans, chalking up, hitting a heavy single, and then going inside to make eggs and check their crypto portfolio. No audience required, no validation needed, just progress measured in pounds on the bar and money in the brokerage account. And every single one of those garages is a fortress that no amount of guilt, shame, or viral crying videos can breach. Now multiply that garage by 10 million across the United States alone, and you start to understand the size of the parallel society that's being built right under everyone's noses. These aren't compounds with barbed wire and machine gun nests. They're just normal houses on normal streets where normal men decided that paying a corporation for the privilege of being filmed doing deadlifts by someone who might call the police if he breathes too loud wasn't a good use of money anymore. And once a man gets that first heavy pull in his own garage with his own music at whatever volume he wants and zero chance of some influencer pointing a phone camera at him and screaming creep, there is no corporate gym membership on earth that can compete with that feeling. That is freedom distilled down to its purest form, and millions of men have tasted it and decided they will die before they give it back. And while we're on the topic of freedom, let's talk about the explosion of remote work and how it became the greatest accidental red pill delivery system in human history. When the lockdowns happened in 2020, companies discovered they could save billions by letting people work from home. Men discovered something far more valuable. They could live anywhere, earn San Francisco money, and pay Boise rent, or Chiang Mai rent, or Medellin rent, or literally zero rent if they bought a piece of land in the mountains with 3 years ago with the money they used to spend on dates and engagement rings. The average digital nomad visa application from American men aged 25 to 40 has increased 1,100% since 2019. 1,100%. These aren't trust fund kids. These are regular software developers, graphic designers, copywriters, traders, OnlyFans agency owners, e-commerce guys, Amazon FBA sellers, men who figured out how to make high five-figure or low six-figure incomes from a laptop and said, "Cool, I'm out." They sold the overpriced condo they were going to turn into a marital home, paid cash for a beachfront condo in Playa del Carmen or a mountain villa in Bansko, and never looked back. And the women who thought these guys would be begging to come back to Cleveland for Thanksgiving are still waiting for the text that will never come. You want to know how lopsided this has become? There are entire cities in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe where the local women now joke that the fastest way to spot an American man is to look for the guy with the MacBook, the gym tan, and the 1,000-yard stare that says, "I have seen some things and I am never going back." These men aren't loud about it. They don't make TikToks bragging about how many passports they've burned through. They just live. They train twice a day. They eat clean. They date sweet feminine women who are happy to see them when they come home. They send money to their moms on holidays and they sleep like babies because nobody is blowing up their phone at 2 a.m. with paragraphs about how disappointed someone is in them. That life is so obviously superior that the only people still pretending it isn't are the ones who can't access it. And before anyone says, "Yeah, but those guys are just running from responsibility," let's be crystal clear about what responsibility actually looks like in 2025. Responsibility used to mean getting married, buying the overpriced house, working 70 hours a week to pay the mortgage and the daycare and the private schools, and then hoping your wife doesn't decide on year 12 that she's not happy anymore and take half of everything plus the kids plus 20 years of your paycheck. That's what boomers called responsibility. Gen X called it a trap. Millennials watched it happen to their dads and said, "Never again." Gen Z looked at the millennials and said, "Hold my protein shake." The new definition of responsibility for men is taking care of your health, wealth, brotherhood, and legacy on their own terms. Everything else is optional, and millions of men have opted out. The coping is getting hilarious at this point. You've got blue check journalists writing articles about how men need to be drafted back into relationships the same way countries draft soldiers in wartime. You've got think tank white papers seriously proposing bachelor taxes on single men to fund social programs for single mothers. You've got dating coaches for women teaching courses called How to Date Down Successfully, because the pool of men willing to date at their level has shrunk to the size of a kiddie pool. You've got women on podcasts saying things like, "I'm open to dating a guy who makes less than me as long as he's tall and has good bone structure," and then acting shocked when those tall guys with good bone structure would rather stay single and stack crypto than deal with the attitude. The mental gymnastics are Olympic gold medal level, but the landing is always the same. Men still aren't coming back. Even the simps are drying up, and that's the part nobody saw coming. The guys who used to orbit 10 different women on Instagram, liking every story within 30 seconds, sending paragraphs in the DMs, paying for OnlyFans subscriptions to women who wouldn't spit on them if they were on fire. Those guys are waking up too. The OnlyFans collapse that started in 2023 and accelerated through 2024 and 2025 has been brutal. The top 10,000 creators are still making money, but the six-figure girls who thought they had it made for life are now back working retail and posting tearful goodbye videos about how the industry changed. What changed is men discovered AI companions that don't argue, don't demand dinner at Nobu, and don't post cryptic Instagram stories about how all men are trash. Men discovered that for the price of one OnlyFans subscription, they could buy a year of ChatGPT Pro and a custom AI girlfriend who remembers their birthday, tells them they look handsome, and never threatens to call the police because they looked at another pixel woman. The market spoke, and the market said, "We're done subsidizing entitlement, and the AI revolution is only getting started." By 2027, the average man will have access to companions that are visually indistinguishable from the top Instagram models of 2023 that speak with perfect warmth and affection, that remember every detail he ever told them, that send good morning texts and spicy pictures whenever he wants, and that cost less per year than one birthday bouquet used to cost. When that lands at scale, the last remaining leverage a certain type of woman thought she had disappears overnight. You think the loneliness videos are bad now? Wait until the AI waifus can cook dinner through a connected kitchen robot, and the only thing a man has to do is press start on the Instant Pot when he gets home from the home gym. That future is 18 months away, and the coping industrial complex is going to need coping lessons. But let's bring it back to the real world for a second, because all of this sounds extreme until you actually talk to the men living it. I was in Austin a few weeks ago for a private event, 100 guys in a warehouse. No phones allowed at the door, no recording, just men being men. There were doctors, lawyers, plumbers, coders, veterans, day traders, cryptocurrency millionaires, guys making 40 grand a year and guys making 40 grand a month, every race, every background, every political stripe, and the vibe was exactly the same across the board. Relief, pure, unfiltered relief. One guy, 36 years old, told me he sold his house in California, paid off every debt, moved to Thailand on a one-way ticket with 50 grand in Bitcoin, and in 2 years turned that 50 into 400, teaching Muay Thai and running an online business. He said the last time he felt stress was the day he got on the plane. Another guy, former Marine, divorced 10 years ago, lost everything, now lives in a 40-foot shipping container he converted on 5 acres in Idaho, has solar, well water, Starlink, and a Rottweiler, and says it's the first time in his adult life he slept through the night without nightmares. These aren't outliers, these are the new archetypes. The most common thing I hear from men who have fully walked away is some version of, "I didn't realize how much noise was in my life until I turned it all off." The noise of constant criticism, the noise of walking on eggshells, the noise of being told your natural desires are predatory, the noise of coming home to silence that somehow still felt louder than a rock concert because it was the silence of resentment. When that noise is gone, when a man finally experiences true quiet for the first time in his adult life, there is no volume level that can compete. You can offer him a Lamborghini and a penthouse and a supermodel girlfriend who promises she's different, and he will still choose the quiet because the quiet is priceless. And that's the final red pill that women are choking on right now. Men don't hate women. Most of these guys don't even hate their exes. They just prefer peace over chaos, freedom over obligation, brotherhood over beguilement. Hate requires energy. Peace requires nothing but a closed door. And millions of men have closed that door, locked it from the inside, and thrown away the key. So when you see another viral video of a woman in her 40s asking, "Where have all the good men gone?" while standing in a kitchen that costs more per square foot than most people's houses, understand what you're really looking at. Someone who won the participation trophy era and is now discovering the trophy was made of chocolate and the sun came out. The men didn't die. They didn't lose a war. They didn't get abducted by aliens. They just stopped showing up to a game that was rigged from the opening tip off. And they're playing a completely different game now on a court nobody else can even see yet. The coping will continue. The articles will keep coming. The politicians will keep promising to fix men. The influencers will keep selling courses on how to manipulate the remaining simps. None of it will matter. The tide doesn't negotiate with the beach, it just keeps going out. And the men who walked away, they're not on the beach anymore. They're already miles offshore, sailing wherever the wind feels good, and they're not looking back to see who's still waving from the shore. Let me tell you about the moment everything flipped for good, the moment that future historians are going to point to and say, that's when the old world actually died. It wasn't a single day. It was a quiet Tuesday in the summer of 2024 when a 33-year-old software engineer in Portland posted a 30-second clip on TikTok that nobody in the mainstream media ever covered. In the video, he simply walked through his one-bedroom apartment that he bought cash with money he used to spend on dates, engagement rings, and a wedding that never happened. He had a squat rack in the living room, a chest freezer full of grass-fed beef he bought direct from a rancher, a wall of books on finance, philosophy, classic literature, a massive monitor with four charts open showing seven-figure crypto and options accounts, a golden retriever sleeping on a memory foam bed that cost more than most people's couches, and absolutely zero trace that a woman had ever existed in that space. No throw pillows with slogans, no scented candles, no ring light in the corner, no gallery wall of girls' trip photos, just pure masculine order and peace. He looked straight into the camera and said 9 words. This is what opting out looks like. Zero regrets. That video got 12 million views in 4 days before TikTok nuked it for harmful content. Well, by then it had already been mirrored on every private Telegram channel, every Discord server, every private Instagram story from Miami to Munich. That was the moment the mask slipped completely. That was the moment millions of men watching from cubicles, from their parents' basements, from dead end marriages, from apartments where they paid for everything and still slept on the couch, looked up and said, wait, that's allowed? Because up until that point, the narrative had always been that walking away meant misery. It meant cat food and loneliness and porn addiction and eventually rope. Every movie, every TV show, every stand up bit, every women's magazine article hammered the same message: leave the plantation and you will suffer. And then here was living proof in 4K that the exact opposite was true. A regular guy, nothing special about his face, nothing insane about his income, just a man who followed the simple formula of lift heavy, eat clean, stack money, mind your business, and say no to everything that doesn't serve you. And he was living better than 99% of married men with 2 kids and a McMansion they can't afford. That video didn't start the walk away movement. It just removed the last excuse every man still on the fence was clinging to. After that, there was no more, yeah, but what if I end up alone and miserable? Because the answer was right there on the screen. You end up calm, strong, rich, and free. Game over. And once that dam broke, it broke everywhere at once. You started seeing it in the most unexpected places. Car dealerships started reporting that single men under 40 were the fastest growing demographic, buying high end sports cars and trucks cash. Not on payments, cash. The Porsche dealer in Atlanta told me his average buyer age dropped from 55 to 34 in 18 months, and the percentage paying cash went from 8% to 42%. The same story in Miami, Dallas, Orange County, anywhere with warm weather and no state income tax. These aren't crypto billionaires. These are regular engineers, nurses, linemen, cops, firefighters, guys who simply stopped bleeding money on women and let compound interest plus frugality do its magic for 5 years. 5 years of no dates, no vacations for two, no destination weddings for people they barely liked, no let's redo the kitchen again conversations. And suddenly they're walking onto the lot with a cashier's check and driving off in something that makes them smile every single time they turn the key. And the best part, they don't have to ask permission to buy it. They don't have to negotiate with anyone about whether it's practical. They just do it. That feeling is crack cocaine to a man's soul after a decade of being told no for a decade. You see the same pattern in real estate now. Zillow's own internal data that leaked last year showed that single men aged 25 to 44 became the number one buyer of rural acreage in 2024. Not families, not retirees, Single men, 10, 20, 50, 100-acre parcels in states most people can't spell. Places with no building codes, no HOA, no neighbors close enough to complain about gunshots or chainsaws at 2 a.m. These guys aren't prepping for the apocalypse in the Hollywood sense. They're prepping for continued peace. They want land they can shoot on, grow food on, build whatever they want on, and never have to deal with a woman telling them the man cave has to become a playroom, or the guns have to go in a safe, or the motorcycle has to be sold because it's dangerous. They want a place where the only female voice they ever hear is Alexa reading the weather report. And they're buying it cash or with 20% down payments the size of most people's entire net worth because they never got divorce scraped. Even the medical industry is feeling it now. Testosterone replacement clinics are opening on every corner like Starbucks used to. Direct primary care practices that only take cash and only treat men are booking out 6 months in advance. Peptide clinics, hormone optimization telehealth companies, hair restoration chains, all of them are printing money because men finally have disposable income, and the number one thing they're disposing it on is themselves. They're not optimizing for vanity. They're optimizing because they finally can. They finally have the money, the time, and the complete absence of someone telling them they're fine the way they are while secretly resenting every extra pound. The average client at these clinics isn't the divorced dad trying to feel 30 again. It's the 30-year-old single guys who decided that if they're going to be alone, they're going to be alone at 12% body fat with a 500 nanogram boost in free tea and the ability to deadlift 4 plates for reps. They're not trying to impress women anymore. They're trying to become the final boss version of themselves, and they're doing it with religious devotion. And the churches are noticing too. The base pastors, the ones who aren't afraid to say the quiet part out loud, are seeing their pews fill up with young men for the first time in 30 years. Not the soy boy, male feminist ally types. Real men. Men who show up in work boots and Carhartt, who bring their Bibles and their AR-15s in the truck, who want to hear about duty and honor and strength and sacrifice, but sacrifice for something bigger than a woman who will leave the second the feelings change. These churches are exploding. While the rainbow flag, female pastor, gentle Jesus churches are putting padlocks on the doors. The men aren't going back to religion because someone guilted them. They're going because they finally found versions of faith that don't hate them for existing as men. And the women who spent years telling men to go to therapy are now discovering that therapy can't compete with a brotherhood that lifts iron together on Saturday and lifts praise together on Sunday. And the education system is the next domino, and it's already tipping. Young men have almost completely stopped enrolling in 4-year universities. The gender gap in college enrollment is now the widest it has ever been in recorded history. And it's not even close. Women are 60% of college graduates in climbing. Men looked at the price tag, looked at the curriculum, looked at the Title IX star chambers, looked at the professors calling them toxic for having a Y chromosome, and said hard pass. They're going to trade school, learning to weld, wire houses, fly planes, code, trade crypto, start businesses, buy laundromats, buy vending machine routes, buy storage facilities, anything that pays immediately and doesn't require 4 years of debt and indoctrination. The smart ones are doing 12-month coding boot camps or Mike Rowe style trade programs and walking into 6-figure jobs while their female classmates are still writing term papers about intersectional feminism. The ones who do go to college are picking STEM degrees that still have value and treating campus like a library. In at 8 a.m., out at 5 p.m., no parties, no Greek life, no dating, graduate in 3 years, leave with zero debt and a 4.0 because they never got distracted by the carousel. The universities are starting to panic. They're sending letters to high school boys with scholarships that would make your head spin. But the boys are tearing them up and going to lineman school instead because the starting pay is higher and nobody can cancel you for being a man. Even the military is feeling the pain. Recruitment is in the toilet, and the Pentagon's own internal reports admit the number one reason young men give for not enlisting is I do not trust the current culture to have my back if I'm accused of anything. They watched what happened to the guys who got railroaded over a text message or a hug that lasted half a second too long. They watched the Navy make training videos about pronouns while China builds hypersonic missiles. They watch generals march in pride parades while the southern border looks like a sieve. And they said, you know what? I'll keep my rifle and my testosterone and my weekends, thank you very much. The private security industry, the private militia training camps, the tactical shooting schools, all of them are packed with the exact same guys the military wish they still had. These men aren't anti government, they're just pro themselves, and they'll protect their families and their brothers without needing a dress code or a rainbow lanyard. The final boss level of all of this is what's happening with legacy itself. Men are starting to talk openly about the fact that they don't want to bring sons into a world that hates sons. They don't want to bring daughters into a world where the daughters will be taught to hate their fathers. They're not just opting out of marriage and children, they're opting out of the entire continuum that used to define male purpose for 10,000 years. And once a critical mass of men reach that conclusion, the game is over forever. You can't shame a man who has already decided his bloodline ends with him if it means his hypothetical son won't have to grow up being told he's broken for being born male. You can't bribe him with tax credits. You can't guilt him with who will take care of you when you're old, when he already has a brotherhood that would take a bullet for him and a bank account that will buy the best care money can buy. The legacy argument used to be the ultimate checkmate. It isn't anymore because men have built a new legacy, the legacy of peace, strength, brotherhood, and zero apologies. And here's the part that almost nobody is ready to say out loud yet, but everybody feels in their gut. This isn't going to reverse. There is no great male comeback story coming. There is no moment where men suddenly wake up and say, you know what? I missed the chaos. Let me go back. That moment does not exist. Once a man has lived in peace for 6 months, a year, 5 years, the idea of going back to eggshells and resentment feels as alien as volunteering to go back to high school after graduation. The juice is no longer worth the squeeze. The squeeze has become lethal, and men have found a different orchard entirely. The women who keep waiting for the pendulum to swing back are going to be waiting until they're 80. The pendulum didn't swing. It broke off the clock and got melted down for bullets. So when historians look back at this period, they're not going to call it the incel movement or the loneliness epidemic or the manosphere or any of the other dismissive labels the coping machine keeps spitting out. They're going to call it the great male exit, the moment when half the population looked at the social contract they were born into, realized it was written in disappearing ink, tore it up, and walked away to build something new. And the craziest part of all, they didn't do it with violence or riots or revolutions. They did it the way men have always done everything that matters, quietly, methodically, permanently. They just stopped showing up. And once men stop showing up, everything that depended on men showing up stops working. That's not a theory. That's thermodynamics. The restaurants are already half empty. The churches are already closing. The universities are already begging. The governments are already broke. The dating apps are already dead. The only thing left is for the last coping mechanisms to burn themselves out. And then the silence will be complete. And in that silence, millions of men will be in their garages, in their cabins, on their acreage, in their overseas villas, in their private brotherhoods, living the freest, strongest, calmest lives any generation of men has ever known. And they will not be angry. They will not be bitter. They will not be waiting for permission or forgiveness or understanding. They will simply be gone. And that, more than anything else, is what keeps the old world up at night. Not the noise of protest, the silence of disappearance, That is the real story of our time, not left versus right, not rich versus poor, not black versus white. It's the story of men who were told they were the problem, believed it for a minute, then stopped believing it and walked away. And once they walked, they never walked back. And so if you're a man watching this and you're still on the fence, still wondering if peace is really possible, still thinking maybe you should give it one more try, let me save you the next 5 years of your life. The door is open, the path is clear, the brothers are waiting. All you have to do is close the door behind you and never look back. The peace you're looking for isn't coming someday. It's available right now today, the second you decide you're worth it. And if you're a woman watching this and you're feeling that cold feeling in your stomach right now, understand something. This was never about hating you. This was about loving ourselves more than we feared losing you. And we do. We finally do. What did you think about all of this? Do you see the great male exit happening around you in real time, or do you still think it's just a phase? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment. Like the video if anything I said hit home. Subscribe if you want more truth bombs dropped every week. Share this with every man in your life who needs to hear it. And just remember, no matter how dark or crazy the world gets tomorrow, all roads still lead to the same place. MWA, men walking away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.